to this keynote address on the topic Mental Health as Harmonious Balance, an Equitable and Sustainable View of Well-Being. The speaker for this session is Professor Antonella Delle Fave. Professor Antonella holds a MD specialized in clinical psychology and is a professor of psychology at the University of Milan, Italy. Her research activities include the investigation of mental health indicators, flow experience, daily experience fluctuation patterns, and well-being components across cultures, as well as among individuals experiencing conditions of diversity and adversity. She has also been cultivating a specific interest in Indian philosophical and medical traditions. Her prolific scientific contributions include numerous papers in international peer-reviewed journals, book chapters, and academic volumes. Beyond her research, her leadership roles have been equally significant. She has served as a president of the International Positive Psychology Association and the European Network of Positive Psychology. She has also served as the editor-in-chief of the Journal of Happiness Studies for 15 years, from 2010 to 2025. It is my absolute honor to welcome you here today, ma'am. The chair for this session is Professor Rajbir Singh. Dr. Singh is presently an adjunct professor at the Chaudhry Ranbir Singh Institute of Social and Economic Change at Maharishi Dayanand University, Rohtak. He is also a visiting professor at the Dada Lakshmi Chand State University of Performing and Visual Arts, Rohtak. With an academic career spanning about 42 years, Professor Singh has held distinguished positions at several leading institutions, including SGT University, Gurugram, Maharishi Dayanand University, and Kurukshetra University. Beyond teaching, he has held multiple leadership roles, including serving as the Dean of Social Sciences and Dean of Students' Welfare at MDU. He has led significant research projects sponsored by the University Grants Commission and the Cognitive Science Research Institute, including a 10-year-long tenure from 2004 to 2014 as the coordinator for the Special Assistance Program in Health Psychology at the UGC. His extensive body of work includes over 80 published research papers and 7 books and volumes focusing on health psychology, well-being, and research methods. We welcome you, Professor Singh, and I kindly request you to take over the session.
Thank you, Ms. Nina, for introducing the speaker as well as the chair. And it's a very pleasant time to share this session with Professor Antonella, who has been working so hard and so long, significantly in the area of positive psychology and well-being. I can recall that she had been here in India, and I think I have been part of that lecture also. Recently, I have been going through a lot of work on harmony. In fact, when I was just reviewing an article, so I could find that her a lot of work in that area, and I'm sure that today also there are certain references on the lecture she is planning today. I'm sure that her experience and her zeal working in the well-being of the people will certainly be reflected in this particular lecture here today. And we all look forward very eagerly what she has to tell to all of us who are interested in positive psychology and psychology of well-being of the people globally, in fact. So I think without taking any time, may I invite Professor Antonella Fave for today's keynote. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Singh. And I would also thank Professor Kamlesh Singh, who invited me to be part of this conference. And it is always a pleasure for me to participate in Indian conferences. Professor Kamlesh, we have shared several research together and several conferences together. So it is, I really enjoy this long-term collaboration, this long-term, allow me to say, friendship with her. And What I will discuss today is, I think, substantially aligned with what I briefly heard from Professor Singh as an introduction. And so I will start sharing my screen. And try to make it bigger. Okay, is it visible?
Yes, of course.
Thank you. So, first of all, I would like to start by underlining that still too often in well-being studies, we forget about the role of culture. And studying culture is not simply collecting data in different cultures and making comparisons through Western tools and Western approaches. And what we know from evolutionary studies is also that, yes, this is well known. We have, as human beings, we inherit two different kinds of inheritance. One is the biological one, and one is the cultural one. And with time, culture took a very strong share of influence on human behavior over and above biology for many aspects. Think about language, which is, of course, an inbuilt predisposition for humans, but culture shapes the brain and shapes the way we use the different areas of the brain to speak and to read, for example. Just to bring an example, reading letters in, let's say, Western alphabet uses different brain areas in European and American based people and in Chinese people. This is just an example how culture shapes not just our way of living, but also the structure of our brain. There are a lot of studies focusing on this topic. They gave rise to a whole area of investigation, let's say a subdiscipline, which is cultural neuroscience, identifying brain differences according to cultures. And what we, for example, know and learn is also, I know that in this meeting there will be prestigious representative of economics in the afternoon. And we know, for example, that within the same population, rich people show differences in brain structure compared to people belonging to the average population. So not only culture, but also socioeconomic conditions influences brain development. And this should not be a strange finding, because like we see that poverty shapes the body and shapes the possibility of a person to grow and to learn and to access information, then we shouldn't be so amazed of the fact that brains are physically and structurally influenced by the socio-economic conditions. So all these observations are aligned, of course, with the biopsychosocial model. The idea that we as humans are biopsychosocial entities with a biological structure, with a contextual inheritance again, and in the middle there is psychology and the person. This idea of the biopsychosocial model was brought to medicine by a psychiatrist, Engel, in 1982, because European and let's say Western medicine was going to become too much focused on the body, forgetting about the social and the psychological. But of course, much earlier in the 40s, WHO said that health is made by biological, psychological, social dimensions, and also spiritual dimensions. Apparently, so this is a contribution by the Western ideas. But, sorry, what does Ayurveda say? Long ago, 3,000 years ago, human beings are unity of sarira, the body, indriyas, the sense organs, manas, the mind, and atman, the spirit. Mind, self, and body make a tripod on which all living worlds stand. This was Charaka Samhita Sushruta Sthana. So it means 7th century BC. For me, the first time I approached Ayurveda and I learned this, I was amazed to see that we have forgotten for millennia this knowledge without trying to bring it to, let's say, to science, because this is ancient science, this is ancient knowledge, and this is a practical knowledge besides being a philosophical one, because Ayurveda is a system of medicine, and it is still used in India as an official system of medicine, besides the Western medicine. But apparently, there is no trace of this knowledge in most of the studies in positive psychology. And in many respects, this is amazing. The idea of this interconnectedness and the fact that and of course, it is not written, I didn't report it here, but in Ayurveda, there are very clear references to the fact that the shape of the individual is not only derived from, yes, mind, self, and body, but all these dimensions are also related to genetic inheritance from the family, to cultural inheritance, and to ecological influence from the place a person is born, from the environment, from the ecosystem. All these dimensions, as we will see later, I consider it in Ayurveda. What we have what we have learned recently from different sciences in the Western approach, and especially from psychology, is that human beings cannot be considered as individual bodies, but interconnection is the essence of our life. First of all, we cannot survive without the help of other people since our early days, because the human newborns are completely dependent on their caregivers. And this is very strongly emphasized by different perspectives. We can quote Erickson, we can quote Bowlby with the theory of attachment. We can quote Bronfenbrenner, who developed this very nice interactionist model, emphasizing attention at the relationships rather than at the people who are in relationship. It is the relational pattern that is important in the interaction between two people. And then, for example, self-determination theory speaks very clearly of relatedness, but we can't forget that self-determination theory was originally developed based on two needs, which were autonomy and competence. And it was the contribution of non-Western researchers who strongly said, hey, you are forgetting relatedness. This is a basic psychological need, exactly like competence and autonomy. When we look at, this is a very classical study we did with Professor Kamlesh Singh as well. and across 12 countries. And when we ask people what is happiness for you, besides psychological definitions, as you can see, family and relations and interpersonal relations come as the most frequent dimensions, taking the biggest share of the situational definitions of happiness. You see that together they reach about 30% of the answers, but also they are much more frequent than all the other situational aspects of well-being. Standard of living accounts only for less than 5% of the answers. And community, society, and spirituality and religion share a very low percentage all over, but we will see their distribution across countries is very different. We can see it here, the distribution of these answers across country, and you can see that spirituality here is primarily reported by Indian participants compared to other participants, but also that, and community society issues as well, which is very low, but it is mainly related to India. And I would like to quote here, just for a brief break from data, a very nice short poem by Rabindranath Tagore, who said, "The one alone is empty." So our identity as individuals appears when we interact with another person. And sometimes poets have the capacity to describe complex phenomena in a very few and clear and synthetic words. So as concerns interconnections, again, deriving findings from this international study, we can say that there are differences in the way people interpret and describe the role of family in their lives as a source of happiness. For example, as you can see here, dividing participants across countries, the dimension of sharing, so again, connectedness, is predominant across all the regional areas of the world. It's from, you see, 48% in the US to 60% in India, but the levels are always very high. And it can be apparently strange to see that defining family as intrinsically valuable is very high, for example, in the US, but very low in India. And we can wonder why. Do Indians, don't Indians give relevance, intrinsic importance to the family? Of course they do, but it is so embedded in their daily life that it's not considered a value because it is there. It is taken for granted in a way. It's something that is born with them and it is already there. You don't have to worry about valuing family. It is part of daily life. As concerns spirituality, again, we see how it is understood. It is more understood as cultivation of faith and beliefs rather than practice. And this is true across countries, although very few people quote spirituality in other domains, but the dimension of cultivation of faith and spiritual growth rather than simply practicing, let's say, automatically, is predominant. And as concerns society, we have this interesting finding that the few people in the other country, in the countries who quote a society as in relation to happiness, focus on their contribution to society. And this is true in all countries. and as well as in India. By the way, I was surprised, and I think this is another topic that is completely ignored in the Western context. I was involved in a reviewing a PhD thesis in India concerning volunteering and concerning training to volunteers. And I was impressed to learn that India has the national schema system, or I don't remember exactly the name, but it was founded in 1969, and it is a national system of inviting young people to do volunteering work for a certain amount of time in their life. And in India, there are over 4 million young people doing volunteering through this national system. 4 million is a lot. And this means that there are 4 million young people working for the welfare of the nation. I think, for example, there would be a lot of possibility to investigate this phenomenon and also to bring this phenomenon to the attention of the other countries. Because I think this investment for training young people to work for the benefit of the society should be known better in also as an example of positive psychology embedded in social positive psychology embedded in the person's training. Of course, we know that the pandemic brought to light the importance of the social support, and this was true across countries. We have a lot of studies. For example, this international study conducted in 49 countries showed very clearly that all over the world, with no differences related to individualism, collectivism scores, social support was positively associated with well-being, and it was especially mediated by an increased amount of social connectedness in the family and with friends in a time where social distancing was forced. What these findings suggest altogether? That relationships are prominent sources of happiness in terms of sharing and in terms of contribution. There are, however, complex articulations across dimensions, because what is considered a value in some countries is considered more a contribution in other countries. It depends on the structure and on the global cultural values. And close connections are relevant for building citizenship everywhere. So, but connections also means not to impose the ego to the other people, because we can only cultivate connection if we can humbly step back from our individual needs and to share needs with other people. And the problem with many definitions of happiness, we are currently, we have been exposed through during the first development of positive psychology, is an emphasis on the individual well-being, and it is an emphasis on the maximization of happiness. How much are you satisfied? How much are you happy? And these ratings are strongly focused on the individual needs, which contradicts these global figures showing that people are born for sharing everywhere. So again, the same study where we studied the contextual definition of happiness brought to light a completely neglected dimension of happiness in positive psychology, which was inner harmony and balance. Which is, and you can see here, we have all the data from these several countries, and everywhere we have harmony and balance taking 30% of the total answers, with satisfaction with life taking only the half of the percentage, 16%, and positive emotions, 13%. So this means that for 2 decades at least, positive psychology has neglected a dimension that in fact is provided as a definition of happiness by people around the world in the highest percentage of answers. After this study, and as you can see, there is also an interesting distribution of how much harmony is represented in different countries. And you can see here we have harmony very close to both samples from India, South India and North India. And also we have some European countries, Italy, but also Mexico, Argentina, while you see this very strong link between USA and satisfaction. This is interesting because since most of the theories were born in the United States, this is not surprising. When people started identifying a definition of happiness, satisfaction came first simply because it's very strongly associated to the cultural pattern present in the country who produced the highest number of papers in positive psychology and well-being at the beginning. But what is harmony? What do we mean with inner harmony? We mean all these different components that were provided in the description of the persons. This study was a mixed method one, and we asked people to describe happiness with their own words. And we have these dimensions that are becoming more and more important today, like peace, inner serenity, psychophysical balance, acceptance of life, inner stability, emotional stability, and as harmony and balance in general. Some studies started delving into harmony more, and we have the harmony scale developed to complement satisfaction with life scale. Inner harmony and balance were identified as components of the authentic, durable happiness compared to the fluctuating happiness, which is more relying on emotions. We have this very nice construct of the quiet ego, which emphasizes the fact that in a balanced way, people can step back from their view of themselves as the center of the world, adopting a more inclusive identities that takes into account other people. And there is also there are nice findings with this scale. And then inner balance, but also, of course, social harmony that was previously studied in much more in Eastern countries, were included as variables in the World Happiness Report. And I can say that they are currently included in the current wave of the European Social Survey. We are still waiting for the findings to see what happens in Europe as well as concerns inner harmony and social harmony. So the fact that happiness maximization is a weird way of living, weird refers to Western, educated, industrialized, rich and democratic countries, was very clearly stated in these seminal studies, which I really strongly suggest you to read, published in 2024 across countries, which identifies a number of dimensions contributing to well-being, including harmony, balance, spirituality, and meaning. And why it is important to look at balance rather than polarizing happiness? Because we now became aware that the resources on the planet are not infinite. that we are coming, and especially we are experiencing this in this very specific period of time, in this present geopolitical situation, we have to consider the fact that we live in a global environment, we share resources, and if something happens at the geopolitical level in which this sharing of resources gets wrong, the world risks to stop. And many human initiatives can be endangered. So we live, and the United Nations speaks about sustainable development goals, because we must reason in terms of sustainability now. We cannot think about, you know, the linear view of progress described by the Western philosophy. We need to go back, or to go forward to a cyclic view of the progress, which is very nicely described by Sanatana Dharma and by Indian philosophy again. We are bounded, all of us, we are bounded in a possibility to look at progress in terms of increase, but also in terms of decrease. Sometimes we need to decrease, to degrow, to support degrowth in terms, for example, of consumption, in order for all of us to survive. So when we speak about happiness, we cannot think about one single measure of happiness, like satisfaction, as describing the real life of people. We need to consider a set of different multidimensional components of happiness and see how, for example, in different countries, they play different roles, because they are also related to culture. So in some countries, in some contexts, in some social classes, we can see higher level of volunteering relevance or community service. In some other areas or context, we can see more emphasis on spiritual meanings. In other parts, we can see more emphasis on family relationships. So it is really important to see happiness not as a single dimension, but as a multifaceted set of dimensions that can vary in their configuration pattern according to the context, according to the age of the people, because we change with the age and we can give priority to different dimensions of happiness with time, and so on. Interestingly, in 2025, there was the second international summit of traditional medicines in India, because you may know that India is now the hub, the international hub of traditional medicines, launched by the WHO in 2023. And the core topic of this summit was restoring balance, in line with the sustainability approach of the UN, in line with the view of health in Ayurveda. Sama, the key word in the definition of happiness in Ayurveda, means balance. Balance in the different functions of the body, in the digestive fire, in the tissues. And prasannatva means contentment. Prasanna means not happy in terms of extremely satisfied, but peacefully contentment. And this was true. This was written very clearly in Sushruta Samhita, so again, over 2 millennia ago. And we have ignored for such a long time in positive psychology this knowledge, which was there from such a long time. The definition of health in Ayurveda is balance in the body, balance in the mind. Even more interesting, balance is considered the natural state of the individual. So healthy in the sense of the healthiest state. And you know, in Ayurveda, Ayurveda describes the body as substantially based on the three functional systems, which are called the dosha. And we have the different doshas accounting for different functions in the body. Vata governs movement in the different systems and apparatus. Pitta governs transformation. It means hormones and digestion, elaboration also at the mental level of sensory inputs, decision-making, goal-focused action. So again, these three systems do not only govern the body, but also the mind. And kapha regulates the body structure, immunity, but also emotional balance and mental stability. So this amazing description of body-mind health can be substantiated in the concept of prakriti. Prakriti is the, let's say, constitution of individuals. And again, we have completely under-considered, even in Western medicine, we don't care anymore about the, let's say, constitution. We are focused on disease. We are focused on single organs and apparatus. We are not anymore able to see the body-mind system in its whole. And again, this is provided by a traditional medicine like Ayurveda, which is currently strongly supported by a huge amount of studies at the scientific level. And for example, this is very important, and this you can think about what do we know in psychology about personality. We have this, Big Five system, but the Big Five system has not a strongly theoretical basis. It comes up from the language, the common language, using adjectives that describe people, and looking at how these adjectives are put together to describe people. So we don't have a true theoretical basis of our definition of the Big Five, while Ayurveda provides a strong theoretical basis, body-mind basis, of how can we distinguish people according to their prakriti, which is the way the different systems working in the body get represented together in that person. And different persons with different prakritis have different personalities as well. They can have different health components. They respond differently to infections, for example. They grow differently. And interestingly, and I would like to stress how it is important to revitalize the ancient knowledge, because again, Charaka Samhita, Sarira Sthana, said, how is Prakriti determined? By the qualities of the mothers and fathers' bija. There was very clearly concept of bija, which is the genetic origin of the life. The sperm and the ovum, we call it today, but at that time it was, and also it was very clear that the contribution were equal from the father and from the mother. Of course, there was a role of the self, of the Atman, and the importance of the contextual, of the context in which the fetus was growing, the womb, the diet and the lifestyle of the mother. What we are learning now, it is now that we learn that life starts earlier and that it is important to follow pregnancy on across all the 9 months and to see the lifestyle of the mother and the stress of the mother and so on. This was very clear and very well known and very well described 700 years before Christ. This is a very brief findings from a study we did comparing, collecting data among different individuals and comparing Prakriti. This was self-reported Prakriti with the questionnaire with the big five. And you see, there is a very nice convergence of findings. For example, as we know, as we expect from Ayurveda, people with Vata Prakriti report lower conscientiousness, higher emotional instabilities, and higher openness to experience. So we can see that Prakriti is not just something philosophical, it is very empirically grounded. And again, we see differences using the PANAS, the analysis of emotions. And again, we can see not surprising findings. Overall, that positive affect is lower among Vata people who are more influenced by emotions and have lower emotional stability. As I said before, there are different ways also to take to investigate Prakriti, because there are different practices that can be acknowledged related to ethnic group, to genetic inheritance, to society and culture features, to ecosystems and climate. And again, this is in Charaka Samhita. This is, I am really always amazed from the knowledge that is available in these ancient scriptures. This is just a, overview of what is now available in very strongly and important journals. The study of Prakriti has involved also the study of genome, the analysis of the correspondence between the definition of Prakriti in Vata, Pitta, and Kapha constitutions, and then genome-wide analysis, as you can see, genetic differences among people in terms of Prakriti. There are softwares today analyzing Prakriti in a very rigorous ways, developed by Indian scholars. There are studies showing how Prakriti is related to heart functioning through to different organ and functional systems. It is interesting that we still know very little about the relationship between Prakriti and well-being in positive psychology. And this is really a challenge that I give to the Indian colleagues. There is a huge amount of investigation that can be done. And again, please consider that Prakriti, as we can see from this very rigorous genetic study, is not a simply philosophical idea. First of all, it's an empirical view because it was used for millennia in the Indian medicine, and it worked, and it is working today because Ayurveda is still an official Indian medicine. And not by chance, India is the center, the international hub of traditional medicines. But it is now time to go into it, because Prakriti doesn't belong only, of course, it's not applicable to Indian people only. Everybody of us has a Prakriti. And why not finally introducing a true, strongly empirically based indigenous concept from India that can benefit the whole human beings. Also in terms of understanding, for example, reaction to medicaments, development of diseases, Could be possible that some Prakriti people are exposed to different kind of diseases. Yes, we know from Ayurveda that it is like this, but bringing this knowledge into, for example, mental health studies could be extremely interesting and extremely important for prevention, but also for developing intervention programs, both for prevention and for treatment based on Prakriti. The cross-fertilization potential, in my opinion, is amazing across different domains. So what can we summarize from this talk? We can see that in order to positive psychology to become sustainable, it needs to expand its disciplinary boundaries, definitely. We need broader theoretical frameworks. And we need to endorse multiple cultural worldviews, because until we use only our instruments to evaluate the outcomes, we will only use a single glass pattern to see reality. We cannot forget that empirical measurement is culturally based. We identify what to investigate based on the culture we come from. And I must say, I really appreciate the work done by Professor Kamlesh Singh, who developed very nice instruments, for example, to investigate Anasakti, to investigate the mental dosha and the other dimensions. But they need to be integrated more. They need to be taken as a serious tools to understand how human functions, because these ideas are not simply applicable only to the Indian population because they were born in India. They are general views of humans. And for too long, we have forgotten the wisdom and the knowledge available in these traditional systems. Also and of course, we need to collaborate more with environmental sciences, because we now realize how environment influences health and mental health. And with this time of climate change, we must take into account all of this. Just one last remark. Traditional medicines, as today stated by WHO, are important not only because they exist, but because, please consider this, if you look at the WHO website, you can see that there is about half of the total world population who have no access to conventional care. There are about 4.5 billion people on the planet who don't access primary care administered through conventional medicines. It is half of the world. Maybe we don't realize this. We live in cities. We have no idea of what happens, really. In India, you have more ideas because you know what happens in rural countries and you have Ayurveda. But in many parts of the world, traditional medicines are the only way people can be treated and cured and assisted. And for this reason, and even because they are cheaper than Western medicaments. And just for this reason, and in terms of sustainability, we need to support this system rather than dismiss them as secondary tools to treat and to support health. So thank you. I hope I am finishing time.
Thank you, Professor Antonella. It was a talk which cut across so many areas, starting from sociobiology and then leading to various dimensions of subjective well-being, and then finally coming to our indigenous Ayurveda concept, which is in itself a theory as well as practice. And we know that, yes, there is a lot of scope in that. But as you have also mentioned, there seems to be a little difficulty in, having the positive psychology and Ayurveda coming together because of the methodologies. Even you have seen that many researchers, the publications you have shown, are also using the same methodology as we are following the verbal subjective questionnaires, as in, Big Five or in Panas or anything else. But here, the Charak Samhita is, of course, a very rich treatise, and it covers everything. And the Prakriti, in Western world, you can say the temperament, the basic nature of the person is very, very important to understand. And the theory itself states that any Ayurvedic practice starts with the diagnosis of the Prakriti. Until unless one does not diagnose, you cannot practice it, nor any sort of medicine can be given. But the practice of Ayurveda is very weak on that concept, and many people would approach Ayurvedic, practice in two, situations. They will never be going for relief of anything mental health problem, because people hardly know it. Though the Ayurveda is too much popular, too much practiced throughout the country, the very ancient one, and people have a lot of faith also in it. But in one situation, when you fail from the the modern medicine, then people will go for that, because they know that it takes time. And yes, it's very important that throughout the country it is directly related to the proper context, the proper environmental context. For the same ailment, different kind of the herbs will be used in North India, but when you go to the South India, the different herbs are used, because that is highly environmental and contextually based. And but the major issue is that you have also mentioned that we need to have a multi method approach, particularly if we have the objective methodologies by experimental techniques, or the tasks on the basis of which we can diagnose the dosha of a person. Then only then. And Charak says that the perfect balance means the all physical health as well as mental health is the one type that of they call it sannapatika, which is the perfect balance of all the three doshas. But there are very few people. If you will come to the population dynamics and then we start going diagnosing the prakriti of the people, we'll find a few of Sanapatika who will, of course, be living a good life, the physically as well as mentally. But then most of the people will be either Dvandvaj, having preponderance of two of them, and one will be having the less of that. And similarly, large number of people will be having preponderance of one dosh, either pitta pardhan, or they call it vata pardhan, or kaf pardhan. So the theory assumes that there should be 7 types of people, in the population, because that is the constitution of the people. And if we work on that, and then we find out that what kind of health, mental health or physical health people are, observing in that particular sense. And Charak Samhita not only mentions that of the herbal medicines, but a lot of practices also. And they have suggested, while telling the properties of the people who have a different kind of prakriti, that in what sort of things they will be best. So I think there is a lot of scope in using objective methodology in order to have a more acceptance. Even in Western world, how people accept it, but more as a philosophy, and sometimes less as a practice, but as a science, and particularly describing the well-being aspect, which of course has, as you mentioned, that the biopsychosocial model, and there are of course features of having all these three things. It's very good that this is a very important one, and you have gone through to investigate these things in different ways, and there is a lot of scope in it. And we can say that the positive psychology with the balance and sustainability can be achieved by having more of the Ayurvedic concepts to come into practice with a better methodology which is acceptable at every place, globally. That seems to be I think, the main theme you try to, convey to all the people who are here, as well as through your writings. I think this is a very, very perfect notion, and one should adapt. That also seems to be more environment friendly practice, and I'm sure that people will be achieving a better subjective well-being, a better well-being, not only individually, but as you say, that the harmony also talks about between people and the entire society that way. So you mentioned that there are, culture of fair and equity based view in it. I perfectly agree with this, and therefore the acceptability of such a concept should come automatically once we start doing researches as well as the practice in this area. This is what I feel. I'm really thankful to you that in such a short period you could come across everything and then putting things in such a precise manner. Thank you so much, Professor Antonella. I'm sure there will be a few queries also with the people. So I think that Naina Nagpal can coordinate with some of those who have the queries, and you can help them to give a suitable, satisfactory reply to them. Naina, please.
Um, Thank you, sir. So I don't see any queries so far. In case anyone has a quick question, they could just post that in the chat Q&A box.
Never mind, Naina, if there are no queries. I think the things go like that. When you go to such a concept, which is so acceptable, so easy to understand, and there are no contradictions within it. This is what it is. It is definitely a very parsimonious concept, very easy to comprehend, but of course difficult to practice. That is the thing, and that's why people have only, inner queries, and they don't come out with the things
Yes,
because
if I
yeah.
can just underscore a fact, the number of scientific publications supporting Ayurveda is growing amazingly. And again, we have genetic evidence, whole genomic studies on this. So it's not anymore really a philosophical concept, because we have data now. We have plenty of studies, and in Ayush, the Ministry of Traditional Medicines in India, they have a whole collection of evidence of how different herbs work with all biochemical studies and so on. So now Ayurveda is not anymore something just to be applied empirically without evidence. There are very rigorous studies. And for this reason, I think it is now time
Yes,
to making it part of our knowledge in positive psychology.
certainly. Yes, we have more scientific footing at the moment. Yes.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Fave.
Thank you so very much, Professor Antonella and Professor Singh, for giving us your time. It has been truly wonderful to have you with us. To everyone who tuned in for this session, thank you for being here with us, and we hope you continue to join us for the upcoming session, which will be moderated by Sargam, who will now be taking over. Thank you.
Thank you, Naina, for coordinating it.